So, Dennis, what happens when someone passes away and they've got a house to sell? What is the first step in the process?
Well, the first step is to raise an estate for that individual because you're not going to be allowed to sell a house and to clear title without an estate raised. Once you go through that process, then the estate would hire a realtor to get the house listed exactly, and like the services that you're able to offer to them regarding recommendations for clean out, staging, all those types of things.
Yeah.
That's really important when you're selling a house. Typically, when you see a decedent pass away with real estate, there's some deferred maintenance issues. So it's not a do-it-yourself type sale.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the time, I mean, sometimes I've seen things where there's just a lot of stuff that's accumulated over a lifetime. And yes, people as they get older, they're fine with the carpets from the 1970s, but the next buyer's not. So yeah, a big thing is, from my standpoint as the realtor, is like coming in to try to get the most value for the house and maybe having some contractors do a little bit of work. I guess the estate can sort of pay for some of that. Is that true?
Yeah, the estate can pay for that. And if the sale goes to a third party, they might be able to utilize some of those on the inheritance tax return as a deduction. One of the important things to keep in mind is, are there any liens on the real estate? And that's something that you want to have a communication with your realtor about, because that's going to play into effect of how you market the real estate.
You might see sometimes like reverse mortgages, I guess, on properties and things like that, right? And just regular mortgages, I guess, too.
Yeah, utility liens are something you see a lot, especially if they've been in a nursing home for a little bit, and things like that you want to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's obviously, towards the end of life, sometimes things are not always getting taken care of appropriately. So if there's a will or not a will, does it matter? Or
So in Pennsylvania, generally not. As long as there's a short certificate, which is the estate, you can sell that whether or not there's a will. Some other states, Delaware, for example, you have to have in the will specifically that the executor is able to sell that real estate. Otherwise, there's some special paperwork you have to file.
What do you do, like, if one of the brothers wants to keep the house and the other 6 brothers don't want to keep the house? I mean,
well, you could do a buyout in that type of situation. There's flexibility, but at the same point, the person who's named as the executor, it's going to be within their discretion based on most wills. So if the language of the will gives discretion and this individual wants to sell it and his 4 brothers agree and his 1 brother doesn't, it's probably going to get sold.
Got you. So it's really like it's a lot of times what the executor really wants.
Yeah, the court doesn't want to hear those type of disputes, so they're going to defer to the executor. Now, if the executor is doing things well outside the bounds, you can go into court and request that be righted. But generally speaking, there's deference given to the executor.
If the house is sold, I guess the proceeds of that sale are going to go into the estate, and they might go to cover some other debts and things like that. Is that true?
Exactly. You can't inherit until the debts are taken care of. And a lot of people get that wrong. Like they'll say, the will says that I'm the beneficiary. It's like, yes, but your parent passed away with $100,000 in debts, and those have to be paid before you could inherit anything. So when there's real estate, even if the family wants to keep it, a lot of times it has to get sold in that circumstance.
Yeah, I had one where it was kind of crazy because I was representing a buyer, and we were buying the house, and the day before closing, the guy collapsed and he died the morning of closing. And I was just like, what do we do now? And like, I think it took about a month to close.
That would be about right because you need the death certificate and then the estate to be raised. And if you're expediting everything, a month's probably fair.
Yeah, it was pretty fast. My buyer was like chomping at the bit to buy it. I'm like, their dad just died or their grandfather just died. Like we have to be a little bit patient, obviously, and understand that. But it did end up getting done. But I did have like one of the family members call me and be like, no, like we think we want to keep it. And I'm like, it needs a new roof, it needs this, it needs that. I was like, who's going to fix all this stuff? Are you going to fix all this stuff? Who's going to agree to pay for all that to be fixed? Like, are you going to split it evenly? Does everyone have the money? Like, it just gets kind of complicated, you know?
Yeah, there's not a lot straightforward. And if families aren't on the same page, and you know this from representing buyers and sellers, it can make a transaction really stretch out over time to get a resolution.
Yeah. I had one also. I was selling the house and we went to sell it. The guy had inherited the property and then he went to sell it and they weren't happy with how the estates were closed out, and then they had to reopen the estates. I guess, have you seen that kind of thing before?
I do. And what frequently will happen is a parent will pass away, and they're typically in this circumstance would only have one child. So the child just keeps the house, maybe does some type of quick claim deed to themselves, and that's not the proper way to handle it. When that person passes away, then we have to raise an estate for that decedent and their parent at the same time to get everything to flow appropriately so a title company could close with it.
So they should probably give you a call to help them through that process.
Yeah, that would be a double process to go through that, to get two estates moving through this.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but there is a way to resolve it.
Yeah, this one that was it's annoying and upsetting for him and annoying for me because it's like we couldn't close. He still owns it. Like, I don't know, almost a year later. And it's like figuring out how to get the family all back together to reopen the estates and everyone to agree on everything. And it's just kind of a mess. So I guess it's really important that people handle everything right when everything happens.
It is. And think of all those carrying costs that the family got stuck with then at that time too. You know, there's a lot of financial considerations to consider. It's easy to say, I don't want to hire a lawyer to do this, but when you look at what the fees are later down the line, it's normally easier to just get it done now.
Yeah, do it right up front. Stitch in time saves 9.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, on my side with the real estate, obviously I'm interfacing with the attorney and making sure everything is being handled properly, but there's a lot more work, I would say, in terms of making sure it's cleaned out, cleaned up. And that's one of the things I offer is more of a concierge level service to make sure everybody's getting communicated with and making sure everything's getting done, trying to make your job a little bit easier, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because when you have a loved one that passes away, there's a lot you have to deal with. And having help of your team to back them, that's a critical assist in that type of situation.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's such a difficult time people are going through, and it's like, how can you help them through it? You know, I think that's about what we're trying to do. We're trying to serve people through this and with our knowledge and expertise and everything.
Absolutely.
Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions for me. I had a ton of questions. I didn't know that much.
Well, thanks, Rob. Glad I was able to answer them for you.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis.
Take care.